Welcome to episode 34 of Accessible Finance, where we demystify personal financial topics and answer your questions so you leave saying, I get it now. I'm Eric Johns.
I'm Rachel John.
Let's dive in. Why are you laughing at me?
It's just funny.
That I haven't memorized the 12 words that are necessary?
Yeah.
I'm with you there. We're keeping this. Let it roll. All of it.
All right. So, Eric, we have come across a number of prospects and clients recently that are very concerned with emergency funds, what they are, what they look like, and how to differentiate that from an upcoming purchase in the short term that you know is happening, and then also just like your long-term investment options. So
Okay.
I'd like to delve into that.
All right. Let's do it.
So, what is an emergency fund? And we've had a whole podcast about this, I know.
We've had a couple, I believe.
We have, but I think that the salience, I think that, oh, Jesus.
Got it.
I think that particularly post tax return, right? Like
Okay.
April 15th comes around, everyone who is hesitant to look at all financial things is forced to look at all their financial
Right.
things. It's their once a year, oh no moment, right?
Yep.
And so there are a number of people we've come across who I think have heard that rule of thumb that tends to be, proliferating everywhere about
3 to 6 months.
correct. 3 if there's 2 incomes, 6 if there's 1. But what does that mean? Does that mean that I need 6 months of my expenses in my checking account? Right? Does it mean that I need it in my savings account?
That's what we're talking about.
Can I invest it? If so, where can I invest it? So
You know a question that I like? Are all savings accounts created equal?
okay, why
Not
not?
even close.
Why not?
I was frustrated recently when I discovered that Capital One had the audacity to pay their customers like 0.1% on their savings account and still call it a savings account.
Wait, really?
Yes.
That's so low.
It's not great. No, it's not great.
Okay,
So
okay,
somehow that's legal.
but hang on.
They did it.
They're Capital One.
Yeah.
That begs the question, though. If somebody claims to be a high yield savings,
They're not alone, by the way. Chase did the same thing.
lovely.
Actually, there was somebody that had like 10K in a Chase savings account. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Let's go see their like 1099 int. Like, let's see what they did. They only have to issue a 1099 int if they generated $10 or more in interest
They
in a
didn't
year.
get it.
They didn't get to they didn't get the 1099 because there was not $10
Okay,
generated. Sorry,
that's
that was a
horrible.
derail. But yeah,
That's terrible.
look, seriously,
Okay,
if you
but
take
wait.
nothing else from this whole episode, make sure your savings account is
Okay.
actually a savings
So
account.
to that end, there are savings accounts that will just be like, I'm a savings account, and then there's ones that will claim to be high yield.
Okay.
Is high yield, in order to claim yourself as a high yield savings account, is that nationally mandated as that means you have to give X amount of returns or higher?
I do not know. Not that I know of. I don't believe you have to,
Right.
but I think that yeah, but I think that consumers would be very dismayed if you did not. There is variance in the high yield savings account rates. So
Sure.
like Ally will issue a different rate than, like a Capital One high yield or something like that.
Sure.
And Capital One will have they'll have different, all the banks will have different tiers. They'll have high yield accounts, they'll have regular savings accounts, they'll have, like checking accounts, they'll have like business checking, they'll have high yield checking, which is usually a joke. It's almost never high yield.
Well, because
It's not like a real yield. It might be like 0.3 versus like 0.1, but it's like
super
great.
high.
You still got
Okay,
nothing.
so then in your mind,
Okay.
what constitutes a decent in a given climate?
Okay.
What constitutes a given savings rate? On your
A
savings
given savings rate or a decent savings rate?
What did I say?
You said a given.
Okay, I didn't mean
Got her.
what
This is a fun one. I like it. Leave it everything interesting. Everything, no cuts.
this
We
is you can
almost
tell it's
never
been a
cut.
long work week.
It's been fun.
Okay, so
This is a good one. I'm excited.
what constitutes a
4% plus.
Okay.
But we would say
So you're saying that the capital
Yeah.
one was really low.
Yeah, it was like 10,000% too low or something ridiculous. Right. So you really want to get the risk-free rate, which right now is 5.25, right? So 5.25% to 5.5% is the federal funds rate. That's what banks are getting overnight. The reason that I would say 4%, then why would you ever say 4% if banks are getting paid 5% or more on their interest? Why would you say that? Well, because market expectations are that rates are going to be cut. That's been moving, by the way, but we're not in the prediction business. We're not going there. Sorry, I can't help myself. I can't help myself.
Brilliant.
So the shorter the term, the higher the rate is currently. So the high yield, I mean, really the high yield savings accounts, right when rate cuts happen, they'll probably be a lot less than they are today. What typically happens, and the reason that we would we'll get into which account should you hold your money in, right? I guess that's where we are.
But
Which account should you hold your money in? Which
yes,
account should you hold your emergency fund in? If not, your checking account. So some people are like, well, you said 3 months of spending, so
I'm
now I
keeping it
spend 10K a
liquid
month.
in my
Yeah,
checking.
I
Yeah.
spend 10K a month. I now have 30K in my checking.
Yeah.
Is that good? No, it is not. We would
Well,
typically,
okay, it's better than not having an
I
emergency
mean, sure,
fund.
yes, I
So
agree.
yes,
I agree.
but
But
it's
let's
far from optimal.
yeah, let's optimize a little bit here.
Yeah.
So this is for, the people that are the DIYers that are trying to optimize. Okay. So what should you do? We would advocate have about a month of spending in your checking account. You really want and is that number like hard and fast? Like what textbook did you get that from? Um, there are textbooks that'll allude to 1 month, and they'll say that's reasonable, but the idea is that you want it to be not inconvenient for you. Like, if you kept $100 in your checking, every time you would go to pay your credit card off,
Yeah.
right? Like,
You have to
you'd have,
pull
like it
from.
might be, like, $500, and you go to try to pay it off. Now you gotta transfer from your brokerage and sell stuff. That's gonna be too tedious for anybody to wanna keep up with, really.
Mhm.
And for what? Maybe, like, an extra 5 or $10 a year? Like, it's not gonna be worth it, in terms of, like, cost benefit, right? So, anyway, where should you keep your money and how much should be in checking? 1 month about in checking, and then the additional amount that's required. And also the current balance in your checking account that is not in excess of 1 month's spending should not be calculated as part of your emergency fund. So if I want a 3 month emergency fund, I spend $10,000 a month and my checking account has $10,000. I need an extra 30K somewhere else. So call it a brokerage account. So I would have $40,000 total liquid.
So you're saying the 1 month expenses in your checking should not count towards your emergency fund.
Correct. That's what CFP coursework says. So that's what most planners are going to be going with.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I think
So,
that's
like, if I had, for example, if I had 20K in my checking and then 20K in my brokerage, right? And I said that I needed 3 months and I'm spending 10K a month,
well,
they would say that's fine.
but I
That's
think
when
that
they would say transfer
I
to me.
think it also makes sense insofar as the fact that like the $10,000 that's in your checking account is for the current month that you're living in, right? It's not above
Right.
and beyond. It's just to meet
Exactly
your
correct. That's
expenses.
exactly right.
But the 30 is your above and beyond 3 months stuff.
Exactly.
So
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think that's a really important point though, because I think sometimes people might say, okay, 3 months of expenses for me is 30,000. Let's say
That's
that you're
all I need
someone
is
who
total.
says, I
Right.
do want to keep it in my checking. I have 30 in my checking. You're still 10,000 short of your $30,000 emergency because 10 of it
Right.
is your monthly.
Agreed. So, where should your emergency fund be held? What we would advocate, well, it needs to be something highly liquid. So, you could choose a high yield savings, you could choose a money market, you could even choose like a short term bond fund if you wanted to. We've had episodes in the past where we've gone over the pros and cons of each. In this, we're just going to talk about what we would typically advocate and why. All right.
Mhm.
So, for us, it's a money market. Why? Its current yield is about 5.15%.
So
All right.
higher than that Capital One.
Yeah, yeah. It's gonna be higher than the savings accounts. It's typically gonna be higher than the high yield savings accounts,
Yeah.
and it's typically going to adjust more quickly on the upside
Yes.
and the downside. It's gonna be more responsive. There's gonna be a lot less lag between what happens on your rate that you're being paid and what happens to the market. Because those accounts, like the money market accounts, are typically holding very short-term paper, right? So they're holding short-term bonds, short-term notes, short-term like promissory, things, right? Like debt instruments, where they're going to be generating basically the risk-free rate.
Yeah.
And the risk-free rate is five and a quarter and 5.5,
Right.
and then they take
Reflects.
their fee for managing the thing,
Right.
and you're going to yield a little bit lower than the risk-free rate. That's okay, right? That's still going to be better than like a high yield savings account. The issue with those, if you're using that as your vehicle for an emergency fund or your preferred account for an emergency fund, they're typically very slow on the upside. So when the Fed starts hiking rates, they're like, well, let's just wait and see what happens. Like we talked about this before.
Yeah.
It's like the price of oil
The
and the
lag
price of
display is
gas,
very real.
right? So like gas is derivative of oil. And so when the oil price drops, the gas stations are like, well, let's see if it recovers, and they'll just hold their price at
Yeah.
3.50 a
And
gallon.
as long as I can,
And then when gas increases, they're like 4.50, let's go, baby. It's the next
right,
week.
they don't hesitate.
Right. And they'll tell you it's because of, XYZ thing, but there's always that
So,
latency.
so far I'm hearing savings greater than checking,
Yep.
money market greater than
We would
savings.
say so. And so I did want to explain why is that greater because um because it's going to be more responsive on the upside mostly.
Okay.
Right? They're both going to drop right when rates drop.
Now, the pushback I think from people would be, well, if it's in my savings, I can access it immediately. But if it's in the market,
Sure.
so how does the accessibility change if it's in a money market versus
I would say
in
if you're in a
savings?
savings, you'll get a same day transfer. Like maybe we already picked on Capital One, let's say I have a Chase checking and a Chase
Oh,
savings
little
account,
bit.
right? I can transfer from my Chase savings to my Chase checking same day and spend it from my checking. I can write that check and it's going to
Correct.
clear in 1 week.
Same day if it's in the same
If it's in the
institution.
same institution, right? But if you're in if you're in like Ally and then you have still have like a Chase checking, right? Then you still very likely will have a 1 to 2 day latency when you're actually trying to roll those funds over anyway. All right. So what you would have in a brokerage account. So what does it look like logistically for a money market?
Yeah.
Well, for a money market, I'm purchasing the funds and selling. Whether I'm purchasing or selling, it's an end of day transaction. So at the end of the trading day, it happens and it's usable by me the next day. Okay, so if I sell today, well, I did it after markets close. Actually, so yeah, so if your after markets have closed, then you're not getting your sales not happening till the end of the next day.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right.
So I don't have the cash until 2 days later. But typically, what will happen is you will sell within market hours. At the end of the day, it will post. Okay. And then the next day, you have your cash. And then you typically, unless you're, checking with Schwab or checking with the same brokerage institution that you're with, so
Right. Schwab
Vanguard,
is our
Fidelity,
example. Yes,
Schwab,
exactly.
then you're gonna have then you have that 1 to 2 day bank transfer. So
So
it
it's
depends on
just
the
a matter
banks.
of one extra day compared
Correct. It
to
should be one extra day because you have to liquidate your money market fund
right.
and then you
Okay,
transfer it to a
so
bank.
hypothetically, right? I have my money in let's say I have a high yield saving. Okay, hypothetical one.
Okay.
I have savings at Chase or checking at Chase.
Got it.
Monday at 10 o'clock, I decide I need money. I pull from my savings into my checking. I'm good on Monday.
Correct.
Okay,
You're good at 10:01. You're
correct.
good as soon as you do it.
Now, hypothetical number two, Monday at 10 a.m., I have money in a high yield savings at Ally. I'm pulling into my checking at Chase.
Okay.
I'm not good till Tuesday, correct?
Minimally.
Well, you said
Mm,
1 to 2 days, right?
yeah.
So Tuesday,
Call it
Wednesday.
Wednesday just to be safe.
Let's say that
Maybe
the
even Thursday. It could be like 1 to 3
well, let's
days. It
say the
depends on your
one.
bank.
So let's say two. Let's
Okay.
split the
Let's
baby.
say it's
So
2.
okay,
Wednesday.
Monday at 10. I'm not gonna have my money till Wednesday.
Got it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now my money is in a money market at Schwab. I still have my checking over at I don't know, Chase, I think was what I used.
Yep.
So Monday at 10, I go and I liquidate that money market. It will post at the end of the day on Monday, which means that it is liquid on Tuesday, correct?
Yes.
So then that we talked 1 to 3 days, we're in around
The 2.
two. So then Thursday I get the money.
Exactly.
So if I'm in a high yield savings that is not currently where my checking account is,
Mhm.
the difference between that and
Yeah, call it a day.
is a day.
Sure.
Um, okay. So I think it's just important because
No, I think that's great.
I think the general
Yeah, we need to demystify it. We need to be able to talk about exactly what's gonna happen logistically, right? Come
well,
on, that makes
I
sense.
think the general consensus when it comes to things with the brokerage is I'm scared to touch it and liquidate stuff because of the
Yeah.
tax consequences. I'm scared to put money there because I feel like I won't be able to touch it when I
Most
need to
people don't
touch
know
it.
what a money market fund is.
Correct. So I think that it's just critical to explain the similarities between that and high yield savings and the
Mhm.
accessibility of the funds. How it's not like I bought shares of Apple, like now I'm kind of screwed and stuck with Apple unless I want to like I don't know, liquidate my position. It's not the same thing.
No,
You can
not even a
access the
little bit,
funds.
right.
It's nothing like a 401k where you literally
Right, it's
shouldn't
liquid.
touch that stuff.
Yeah, so it's thought of as like an I don't wanna get into the value of a dollar changing for 2008.
No, don't
Not
do
worth
that.
it, not
Don't
worth
do
it.
that.
But money market funds are liquid. They're stable. You're gonna put a dollar in, you're gonna
Yeah.
get a dollar out, and you're gonna be paid interest on your dollar, similar to a savings account.
So
It's gonna
would
be
you
almost
say
the same.
then that your advocacy for the most optimal place to house an emergency fund in an average scenario, there may be exceptions to the rule, would be a money market account?
We're just spitballing here, having some financial conversations for education, and this is not in any way to be construed as financial advice.
Perfect.
We prefer money markets.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we do.
So,
Um,
hypothetically, personally, I enjoy a money market fund.
okay. So then that begs the question of this. Okay, this is for my emergencies. This is for the hot water heater breaking, the car breaking down, the things that I don't know when they're going to happen, but I know they will inevitably happen.
Right?
What if I now have a short-term purchase in mind? Like in the next year, I am saving up for a car.
Okay.
Um, is a money market still where I should be looking to house those funds?
I like it.
You do.
I like it. Yes, we'd be fine with that.
Fine.
Y
But I don't wanna be fine. I wanna be
Optimal.
Great.
You want to be
I
optimal.
want to be the best.
Yes, you
So where
should.
should
So
those be?
sub 5 years, you're probably not really thinking about equities, right? There's going to be too much volatility in those markets, and you can't guarantee that you're going to have a positive return over that period. You can't actually, well, empirically, they haven't even returned 100% of the time over a 10-year period. I think from a little bit before, sorry. Just going granular.
Give you a face.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. Too granular, guys. Sorry. Yes, you could do that. Money market or short-term bond fund. If you're looking to just really min-max expense
Okay.
ratios, you're going to have lower expense ratios on like a short-term bond fund like VGSH than you would on like Schwab money market, like
Mhm. So it's really worth
SWVXX.
looking into like comparing those two and
You
seeing what
could,
fits.
but it's money market's fine. It's good. It'd be really hard. I mean, you could sit there and nitpick back and forth, but it's like,
Some people want to, but I would say the majority of people are
yeah,
just like,
almost everyone would be
leave
like,
my
"Yeah, you're
money
fine
safe.
in a money market." And
Okay.
and and they would most advisors I would say you're fine in a money market. That's optimal for a short-term purchase.
Yeah.
You should sit there in your, if you have I'm saving up for a down payment on a house,
Yeah.
I'm saving up for a
Yeah.
car,
Yeah. Yeah.
new hot water heater, new AC unit, whatever.
So you were
Money
just talking about like 5 year horizon. Does that mean that you would consider anything less than 5 years short term?
I would consider anything less than a year short term, but yes, I would consider that like medium term, I guess.
Okay. So what would you do with medium term? What about a 3 year, 3 to 4 year
Oh, 3 or
out
4, still money
purchase?
market, 100%.
What about a 5 year out purchase?
I'll go money market.
What about a 6 year out purchase?
We're gonna have a conversation
Okay.
about like where the other. So this is
And
what you
how
want to know.
realistic it is that
This
it's
is
happening in 6 years too.
That's for sure, that's part of it, but
Yeah.
also, like, what are your other sources of income? So we'll talk to people about this too when we're talking about an emergency fund. If you ran out of money, like, let's say you got fired, your AC breaks, and your transmission goes out, okay? Same day, your life's not
It's a
great.
super fun
What
day.
what happens when your life implodes like that? Do you walk to your parents' house next door and they hand you, like, a stack of cash?
That's
You know
true.
what I mean? Like,
It
some people have larger
situational,
safety nets than others,
yes,
like, this
situational
world
stuff.
is not exactly fair in
That
that
reminds
sense.
me of the lady in the grocery store who was talking about how all her stuff broke and she was gonna have to go back to work because
Right.
she did not have
Nah,
anything.
yeah, like, some people
Um,
just don't I mean, it's you know,
no, I do think that
everybody's plight in life is not the
sure.
same.
I mean, and the thing,
So, if you're fortunate to have, like, all of this to fall back on, you can
yes,
I mean, we still want an emergency fund, but we
yes,
could talk
there's a
about a
bit more
lower
wiggle
emergency
room.
fund, or we
Yeah,
could talk about what kind of risk you're comfortable taking because you know that or you think you know that you're gonna have that bailout.
correct. Agreed. I think that the longer out that we're talking, the more situational realities and differences really
Mhm.
come into play there.
Yeah, one of the points we do wanna make, though, is an emergency fund is for emergencies and not, like, vacations.
Yes,
And
exactly.
and they're worth having. So part of the goal here, like, why do we need emergency funds at all? So our goal as accumulators of wealth should be, assuming that is your goal. I mean, some people are like,
I get a dollar, I
like,
spend a dollar.
yeah, get a dollar, I spend two, right? Like, I'm here for the moment.
One of our three children is just like
Maybe so. We'll see, but
he's a
probably,
work in progress.
probably. Um, so, like, assuming you want to be accumulators of wealth, you want to provide for your own retirement in addition to Social Security, whatever. Your goals should be to not borrow money from people, but have people borrow money from you, right? So you want to be having money markets pay you at 5%. You don't want to be paying banks at 8%, 9% for
Yeah,
a car loan or a mortgage. You don't want to be paying your credit cards for sure at north of 20%.
I
So,
agree.
like, we certainly want to eliminate those debts and eliminate the need for those debts.
Correct.
So if we don't have an emergency fund, that's part of the problem is we would have to accumulate those debts to live
Correct.
in the absence of an emergency fund. Like
Right.
my car breaks, my transmission breaks, we just bought a new van,
And
let's say it just
shockingly
breaks.
enough, the rate that you're paying when you're borrowing the money is a lot higher than the rate they're paying you
Yeah.
use yours. Agreed. And I think that particularly given where we live and where like the majority of our audience lives, I think that
Yeah.
you definitely need it done.
Yeah.
We've lived
It
through it.
was a Wednesday last week when it wasn't there was no there, I don't know, but that thing wasn't named, right? It was just a random storm
No,
and
okay.
was it
So
named?
no, it wasn't. It was
But I
bizarre.
watched three cars on,
The
the street get flipped.
Our kids' school stayed
I
open.
walked home like 2 blocks.
There was an alligator in the backyard.
Yeah,
Like
it
it
was
was
wild. So, yeah, Southern Louisiana, you're gonna have some unexpected costs, and they're not gonna be fun.
absolutely. And there are people who did. I
We're
mean,
not talking jet skis here.
literally, someone that I work with had a tornado land and knock a tree down that caused significant amount of damage to
Right.
house and car. Like it's
And,
just
yes, some of these things will be covered by insurance, but you're still gonna have deductibles. You still might want to pay
and
for somewhere to live while you're
even
waiting on
though,
the
well, this
payments
is the
and
thing, exactly. Even though the insurance is there, like she still needs a vehicle to drive.
Yeah, what are you
Her
gonna do? You
car
still have to go pay
insurance
Enterprise.
did not show up that day to give her a
Right.
check. So like there's
Enterprise
still
doesn't take
no,
IOUs.
exactly. There's still a lull in between. Even if you're fully covered,
Mhm.
you still don't want to be inconvenienced for the time until you become covered.
Right.
So you don't want to be in a position where you're borrowing money until they can pay you back. So then you can pay the credit card company back and then you're still out of pocket.
Right.
So absolutely agree.
So the one
Emergency
other
fund.
the one other small point that I wanted to make is when is it okay to have less than 3 to 6 months of emergency fund? When can I actually draw on my emergency fund for things?
When it's an emergency.
Well, sure, sure, yeah, like, obviously, right?
Oh,
But what if I'm in, like, a significant amount what if I don't have an emergency fund yet, and I have, like, a ton of credit card debt, for example, right? So there are
look at the
certainly situations where we would talk about paying that debt down first, right? Like, we would very much talk about that, because what happens if there's an emergency? You're just putting more in your credit
yeah,
card debt, right?
at a high rate.
Right, like, you're still gonna do you the same thing, like, the same line of credit that you have currently, we would probably
You just wouldn't
advocate
be in
paying
it
that
as
down
longer.
first. We'd have a real
Exactly.
conversation with the person,
And
but
it's important to note too that not all debt is created equal. So if you're somebody who has various types of debt, various interest rates, you're not necessarily just, and we did a podcast about this too,
yep,
actually. You're not just necessarily paying down the smallest bill.
right.
Um, the interest rate really matters. So I think that if you're not comfortable sitting down and looking at like which debt do I pay off first,
Yeah.
definitely get with somebody.
Dave Ramsey likes the snowball where you pay the smallest debt balances out first.
I,
I like, I believe, what's called the avalanche, or that's what he refers to it as, where you pay
I
the
don't know.
highest rates down first. That's what I'm
I'm
advocating all
I
day.
so I feel I understand both. I think that the psychological component of like feeling like
I've
you're
won, I've beaten this debt. Now
yeah,
I can beat
like
the
those. I
others.
mean,
Yeah,
it's
I get it.
the same idea behind a checklist where you get that little dopamine hit
Let's
when you
talk about it. We'll
you
give you
scratch
gold
something
stars.
off.
We can make
Well, that's
profits off
exactly what it
this
is. I don't think that. Oh Jesus,
one. I need it.
I don't. This
Go on.
one's gone off the rails.
It's fun. I'm
Um,
having a good time.
don't think that the only way to feel that sense of accomplishment is to pay off one entire
I agree. That's what I'm
chunk of
saying. Gold
debt.
stars. Let's go.
But that's
That
exactly what it
boys.
is. I feel like you can, I mean, my entire life in education has been all about
Finding ways to
manufacturing
positively
this
reinforce. Yeah,
feeling
yeah, yeah.
of, yes,
Yeah, you
of
need the
winning.
dopamine hits without. Yeah,
Correct. And so I think that if that's something that you need, it still doesn't necessitate paying off the
I
smallest
agree. It's attainable. We'll
bill.
find a way to get it.
Agreed. I think that numerically, the math does not
Right.
support it.
I'm a big fan of math.
Yeah. Right. Numbers help. All
Alrighty,
right.
guys. Well, thanks. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review the show. If you have any topics you'd like to discuss or problems you'd like solved, reach out to us at podcast@equilibriumfp.com or visit our website at equilibriumfp.com.
Yes. Till next time.
Thanks, guys.